Are you ready to become the balanced leader you are destined to become? Then stay right here. Welcome to today's Balanced Leader, where we empower today's leader to be the best that you can be, both in your professional and personal life. I'm your host, Caroline Baird, and I've explored and believe the intersection of wellness and leadership are key to finding the balance you are craving as a leader. This is the show where we focus on leadership and the importance of maintaining balance in today's fast-paced and constantly changing world. We talk about topics related to leadership, from communication and team building to personal development and finding balance during challenging times. We will also hear from inspiring guests who have achieved success in their fields and have valuable insights to share about their leadership journeys and on what it takes to be a successful leader. But this podcast isn't just about leadership, it's also about wellness too. Taking care of your mind, body, and spirit is essential to becoming a successful leader, and you'll get tips and strategies for living a healthy, balanced life, from managing burnout and improving mental health, to finding ways to reset and reground during a typical day at work so that you can achieve your goals. So whether you're a CEO, an entrepreneur, or just someone looking to improve your leadership skills, this podcast is for you. Are you ready? Well, let's get going. Hi there, this is Caroline. I wanted to tell you a little bit about this episode because it's going to change how you think about things. Because we're not just talking leadership, we're breaking it down and taking it to the next level by exploring how your DNA influences your life and your leadership style. Imagine customizing your life based on your very own genetic blueprint. Intrigued? Well, you should be. We'll also discuss how to find the perfect balance and harmony in the fast-paced life, all while you pick up tips from this beautiful expert that will unlock your genetic potential. Before we dive in, though, I want to share some exciting news. My Soulful Healing membership is a fantastic way to support your nervous system and elevate your overall well-being. And if you're seeking a healing retreat that's relaxing yet profound, join me at my Embracing Peace retreat. We are in full swing. And imagine a 5-hour retreat that leaves you rejuvenated and empowered. Want more details? Just reach out to me. You won't regret it. So get comfortable, take notes, and get ready to transform your leadership journey with some actionable advice and cutting-edge insights. Ready to get started? Let's jump in. Welcome to this episode of today's Balanced Leader. Today, we're going to have Brenda Wollenberg, who focuses on analyzing and interpreting genetic profiles to design personalized holistic wellness programs. Guys, this is huge. You're going to be so excited to hear about this. So Brenda has been featured on TV, podcasts, and in print media, and she teaches in various educational and corporate settings. She's authored Overweight Kids in a Toothpick World and Eat, Sleep, and Move for Your Genetic Body Type, and loves co-creating personalized wellness paths with her clients, considering their body types and genetics. With decades of experience as a social worker, co-leader of a faith community, and nutritionist, Brenda helps clients understand the science of their genetics and recognize behavior patterns affecting gene expression. She then guides them in shifting these behaviors, whether related to diet, exercise, stress management, or supplements, towards a better health. Wellness can often be confusing and ineffective when approached with a one-size-fits-all mentality. Brenda simplifies it. She truly does. Brenda simplifies it, making wellness personal and doable so you can be your best life. Brenda, welcome to my podcast today.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thanks for having me. It's a favorite topic to talk about, so I love it.
I'm so excited. And you and I had the privilege of having a chat before we hit record. And so there's lots of questions that I have for you, but let's begin with your journey. Everybody has a different journey, and I'd love for you to share with the listeners a little bit about how you got to doing what you do today.
Absolutely. I think a lot of times how we are raised, the family of origin, really impacts how we move forward. And I had a great family, but just a lot of struggles, mental health issues, and different members of the family and things like that. And my first career, as you mentioned, social work, I think a lot of it was motivated by the desire to really sort out some things myself. I think a lot of times we end up going into careers that can be helpful to us, hopefully, as well. So I loved that career. I worked in a lot of different arms of the both Alberta and BC social services, and ended up working with adolescents who are really struggling and have fallen through the cracks of Attorney General and mental health, education, social services. And it was in a contained unit, a locked unit that I was a social worker for, as we began to create that. Actually was part of developing that whole program. As we were working with childcare workers and the overall head, how are we going to help these kiddos? Like, what is the best way we can work with them? And that was my first kind of really major introduction to holisticness. Like, okay, we need to get a really good cook who's kind of maternal, and who makes really healthy food. And yes, sometimes foods for birthday parties and things like that, but we just can't be feeding these kids like garbage. I was trained in something called the Jesna's inventory. These kids need to be treated individually. They are in different stages of development. So there was this beginning growing awareness of, oh my goodness, like, yes, there's foundational truths that everybody should be adhering to, hopefully, in diet and exercise and mental health and stress practices, etc. But there's also an individualization that needs to happen here. And so, yeah, so that was that. As you mentioned, Coletta Faith Community, which I learned tons in that. And a lot of this was consecutive. I'm actually not like 100 years old, okay? So it was consecutive. And then I remember flopping down on the couch one day beside my husband. We have 5 children, and the youngest was getting ready to go to kindergarten in that next year. And I said, man, like, I really feel like I want to go back to school. Like, I want to get this other component. I've learned so much about health because I did get healthy as a sick social worker. I was introduced to an herbalist that rocked my world, and very woo-woo, and I was like running away, but embraced it finally, and it changed my life. I said, okay, I need to, if I'm going to write in the social work field, the emotional, anything pastoral, I need to go back and get some more training as the kind of new nutrition food aspect. So I went back to school, and then went to kindergarten, became a holistic nutritionist, and decided I wasn't just flighty, which I thought I was, and I couldn't decide what to do when I grew up. I actually just wanted to get these pieces all together and recognize the overlap. So yeah, so that's how I ended up in this place of loving body, mind, spirit work and not wanting it to be done in isolation, I guess.
I love that. And you and I were talking a little bit about that, where I think we've come to kind of this place in time where people are really looking for ways. And I talked to you a little bit about fulfillment around what does that life look like? Because I know I can't continue necessarily at the pace that I'm at or doing what I'm doing. Something needs to shift, and that mind,
Yeah.
body, spirit really comes into play. But we only have one body. So if we're not taking care of it, and, I learned from another guest, when we ingest our food, we want to ingest it with purpose, with love,
Mm.
so that it is in turn giving us that, as opposed to just throwing it together. And
Yeah.
I can't wait to get into the details of what you can now tie into the listeners also who've enjoyed that episode, into the DNA, the gene
Yeah.
aspect of it, and how these fad diets, this is why they don't work for many people, because it doesn't resonate with their body and how their body works. So I can't
Exactly.
wait. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I think when 5 or 6 years ago now, it was, I have a business partner that's also a nutritionist. She's also a PhD biologist, which is really lovely. And she dragged me out to a full day workshop, what became the beginning of this deep dive into epigenetics. And I remember, sitting there, and I thought, okay, I have university biology. I had to take biology, anatomy, physiology, organic chemistry, chemistry when I became a nutritionist. But I am sitting here in this workshop. I am like way over my head. And I glanced over at my friend Alicia, And my only consolation was here, somebody with a an undergrad in biology, a master's in biology, and a PhD in botany was over her head as well. And I thought, oh, good, 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 good. We're going to survive this. So this whole field of epigenetics is, in one way, it's new because the human genome has only been mapped for just 20 years now. And so we haven't known the actual names of these genes, and we haven't understood some of the things that they specifically do. But epigenetics, meaning over and above genetics, meaning what the things that you do to yourself, whether that's how you eat, as you mentioned, or how you manage stress, the ways that you practice mindfulness, how you exercise, and then the environment. So what pollutants happen to be in the water, in the air, in your food, what types of trauma you may have experienced in your growing up years or your adult years or whatever. That milieu, that makes up the environment. And so, for a long time, scientists have known that there's some kind of interaction with this whole thing of, well, if we eat this way, this could probably help. Or if we did this type of meditation, this could probably help. I mean, the thousands of years of traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, even within those, some differences, knowing that there was different, categories of people that you should direct perhaps different recommendations towards, it was still not as precise as now can be done with the mapping of the human genome. So that's kind of the journey of the better types, I think, of wellness have always been ones that just simply didn't say, oh, do you have a headache? Here's a prescription. And I'm not saying anything against Western or more modern medicine, because, if your kid gets hit by a train like one of ours did, you're going to be glad that there's that. You're not trying to, I don't know, hippie medicate them with herbs or something. You just want someone to keep them alive. So there's differences in the ability of different types of practices to be helpful. But when we look back at some of the traditional practices with their individuation of how you would treat someone or make recommendations for them, that really was the foundations, I think, of what this epigenetics new term has been the last 20 years.
Well, and that's so interesting because when I think about mind, body, spirit, and sorry to hear about your child, that's like,
they survived very well. They're great now, but it was,
okay.
yeah.
But as you were saying that, I was even thinking, there are things that we can do to protect our body and have it be able to heal quicker when situations like that come up, right? And I think that is part of the key. We talk about longevity, but we also have to talk about how we're treating it in the meantime, so that when something foreign does impact it, the body has the opportunity to fight or prevail through it, right? And I think that is so important.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about what epigenetics is, but I'd love for you to maybe share more around. And we talked a little bit about 23andMe and DNA. Maybe share a little bit about what that journey looks like.
Sure. So I'm going to give, if it's okay, a quick biology 101 little thing, just in case there's readers who are going like, oh, shoot. Yeah, I remember something about marshmallows and toothpicks in grade 10, but I don't remember much after that. So DNA, you get one strand from your biological mom, one strand from your biological dad. They're basically 4 letters of the DNA alphabet, A, C, G, and T. And so each gene has 2 letters that it's made up of. And so that means your options are to get the same letter from each of your parents and say that was the normal one. You would be what is called homozygous for normal. Typically, that is the best case scenario. Not always. Occasionally, the variant is better, but generally, the normal is more usual, and it is generally the one that confers beneficial properties. Or you could have been in a scenario where you got the variant from both of your folks. You're homozygous for the variant. Usually, that is more challenging. The gene is expressing itself in a certain way, or it's not being allowed to express. And then we have what's called heterozygous. You got one variant and one normal. And if you look at them in, Alicia and I often work in like a traffic-like scenario. So usually homozygous for the normal is green. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. thumbs up, you're probably operating well. Usually the heterozygous, one of each, we kind of call it a yellow coding, and then red would be a little more challenging. So that's what happens. Now, what's interesting, because I'll have clients say, oh, if I get my genetics done through 23andMe and say I'm AT on something, after I work with you, will my genes change and I'll become, double the positive one, the most beneficial one? And I'm like, okay, let's go back. Nothing changes. Like, your genes are your genes. People say, well, do I have to get my 23andMe done every couple of years to see how I'm doing? I'm like, no, no, no. It's a one-shot deal. That's your DNA. Okay. What is interesting, though, and this is the role that we're finding epigenetics is so phenomenal, is that what instead happens is that we can modify gene expression. And what I mean about that, again, is there's no alteration in the actual genetic code, but how your gene DNA, how that particular gene is expressed can be changed by what you do. So I liken it, and again, my PhD botanist partner just rolls her eyes, but I think about an electrical panel. Okay, so you got one in your basement or your garage somewhere in your house. When that was installed, some of the switches are one way, some of the switches are the other way. Likewise, when we get our set of DNA, some of them are in a challenging position, some of them are in an ideal position, some of them are kind of halfway in between, that yellow heterozygous. Now, what's fascinating about DNA is that you can have power surges. Okay, just like you can have in your electrical circuit. So let's say when you were being carried in utero, your mama had just super stressful times going on in their life, whatever that might be. Okay, that can, even from the get-go, be setting some of the genes that should be being expressed positively, having them, not expressed that way. Likewise, after you're born, have all the ACEs, the adverse childhood events, could be some things that, again, can negatively impact gene expression. But the really cool thing is you can also have power surges that are, oh my goodness, you're in a really loving relationship. Your parents did a really great job of nurturing you. You happen to live on a farm where you grew all your own food and had really good nutrition. These are all things that can reset, as it were, the optimal genes that you have into a really great position where they're expressing themselves well. Or literally, in Bruce Lipton's words, he's a biologist, I believe, wrote a book called The Biology of Belief a number of years ago. It's almost like that gene that is a more challenging gene will have a little sheath pulled over it in the DNA strand, and it won't express itself. So it becomes almost dormant in a way. So that's how, getting your data done, getting the swab or the spit test. Some of the tests are, spitting saliva into a vial. Other ones are simply the swab test, like you see on TV for the cop shows, for example. Okay. And when that's sent away to whatever, whatever agency you choose, whatever company you choose, they then run that data and they'll send you back what's called a genome file, simply a notepad listing of all these different RS numbers, long coded numbers, that then I use a couple of different software that I'm trained in. I will just run it through one of those software systems, and it will spit out very practical, very helpful information. So that was a long explanation. Sorry.
No, that was great. I learned a lot in your explanation of that. It explains a lot. Not even thinking that, even while, of course, while we're in the uterus, things that our mother ingests, the stress, whatever that is, can definitely impact us. But I love how we also have the opportunity to have those power boosts that are positive. And, I think vacations, it came to mind. People use
Yeah.
vacations as part of
Yeah.
that, right? Had a
Yes.
stressful time, and now here's my time to regroup, to
Yeah.
reset, to feel better. It's just really interesting how that's our opportunity to slow down, to enjoy, to be mindful, to live some loving experiences, to eat better,
Yeah.
right? To get more work,
Yes.
more
Yeah.
exercise. So, but
Yes.
we need to do that on a more regular basis. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So, and we don't have to go into huge detail. You talked a little bit about it already, but Is there anything more? Because you talk about like our daily habits. So, our daily habits can affect our DNA and overall health.
Yes.
So, it can be diet, exercise, stress management. Share a little bit more about that, maybe, and just kind of what have you seen from your experience? Because sometimes they can just be small little shifts that you make a huge difference for you, right?
Exactly, exactly. So in my coaching and in my the courses that I run, we look at five things. We look at energy, we look at clarity, we look at structure, we look at feedback and accountability. I always start with energy, which means we're starting with nutrition, because it's very hard for someone who is tired, stressed, maybe inflamed digestive issues, maybe dealing with a little bit of anxiety or depression, for me to say to them, okay, I would like you to start doing like this much exercise a day. And oh, could you please, spend this much time doing mindfulness? And their cells, their mitochondria are not even producing the optimal amounts of energy that you need to be able to do those kinds of things. So we always start, almost always, there's an odd time where there's something really, big in one of the areas, but almost always start with food. So the nice thing about genetics is that it really gives us a really lovely idea on very specifics on the amount of protein that our body would love to get each day, on the amount of carbohydrates. And I'm not talking vegetable carbohydrates, I mean like more higher carb count things like rice, for example, or quinoa or fruit. We can know how many times a day we should be eating that. We know saturated fat is super important. Saturated fat makes cholesterol, that then makes all of our sex hormones. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the right amount of that. And it really has been vilified in the last, probably 30 or 40 years now. And I'm like beating my head against the wall, going, no, no, you can't have low fat everything. Like, you need this. Or likewise, people who are on a very low carb, maybe a carnivore diet, for example, which for some people for a season can be super helpful. For other people who have the genetic coding where they really need to be eating those higher carbs, 3 meals a day, what you see over time is massively diminished energy. You see there starts to be some thyroid issues because they literally are not getting the carbohydrates that they need. So it's and we talked earlier about whether we should intermittent fast or 3 meals a day. I actually can look at your metabolic genes, and you never have to worry for the rest of your life if you should join your neighbor intermittent fasting or not, because you will know that you're wired more for that. And again, if you're doing it and you're not, it's not good. It's a stress on the body. It produces more cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine, the stress hormones. And so you want to make sure that you are eating in alignment with what your body would thrive on. Once you then get that happening, and usually within a matter of 2 to 4 weeks, people start to feel a shift when they are, fueling. First weeks can be a bit rocky just because of, especially if they've been eating a standard North American diet, could be some sugar withdrawal. There can be some, not great feelings as you're kind of getting rid of things, but we always minimize that as much as possible, give you lots of tools around how to handle that. And then we can start looking at, what, I know you love Tabata and you love heading to the gym and doing high intensity interval training. It is massively contributing to your inflammation. You don't have great genes for doing that. You've got issues with your sodium potassium pump. It's not getting rid of lactic acid properly. How do you feel about moving more to endurance, like swimming lengths or biking or hiking? So it's a dialogue, because it's not just about a new prescription and off you go and I never talk to you again. It's like, how does that resonate with you? How can we gradually move towards that? You feel comfortable with that, and just have that dialogue. So those are a couple of areas. The other area that I'm massively interested in because of the social work, training and experience, is all of the areas to do with neurotransmitters. So how is your dopamine production? How are you doing with serotonin? What are your long and short-term stress responses? Can we look at sorting through that in a way that is more beneficial to you? a lot of times I'm working with clients who have addictions of some type, whether it's a food addiction or a substance addiction, a behavior addiction. And many times, and this is oversimplified because these hormones work across, it's not just like one hormone does this, but often a king or queen player in it will be that somebody doesn't make enough dopamine, or they make enough, but it's degraded really quickly. So there's an ongoing search for ways to elevate that sense of pleasure, sense of motivation, focus, perseverance that dopamine can contribute to. So it's really helpful if you know that you have a challenge in that area and that we can do something about it, so that the drive to online shop or eat sugar or gamble or have risky sex, whatever it might be, that drive can be dealt with in other ways. So that was a lot. Sorry. Pick out
No,
anything you
that
want
is
to know more
great.
about. Okay.
Yes, yes. And that helps a lot because I think, it's not a one size fits all we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about that, right? Like a
Yeah.
keto diet might work for one person where a Mediterranean diet might work better for someone else. And I, I think the epiphany for me was around, um, that you actually, if you're doing something that doesn't align with your system, you actually can be hurting yourself even further, right? Where I was like, well, it's healthy, so it must be good. But that isn't the case. Similar to like
Yeah.
working out, right? Everybody
Yeah.
thinks you must have the cardio, you must have, right? Like XYZ. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's not at all how your body responds, and it
Yeah.
needs it
Yeah.
needs
Or
TLC.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like you said, you're doing it, but you're paying a price.
Right.
There is massive inflammation, for example. And the two things that we know that pretty much drastically impact every cell in the body, one is inflammation. And
Right.
if you're exercising incorrectly, then it could contribute to that. But the second thing is stress. And so if we can, after we get the food nailed down and you're feeling a little more energetic, if we can work at ways to minimize inflammation, if we can look at ways to reduce stress through different types of mindfulness activities. If you are someone that, I talked about the long-term stress response, if you are someone that tends to easily get stuck in cortisol production
Mm-hmm.
in sympathetic nervous system and have a harder time being able to rest and recuperate, that it was me. Okay, that was completely eye-opening. Well, not surprising, but completely eye-opening. And the change of in the last 5 years in being able to rest more easily and not just sneeze and be back in sympathetic mode again and worrying and ruminating and whatever is very, very fascinating and life-giving. And we talked about this earlier, longevity producing, because that cortisol, when it's not, I mean, it's essential. We need cortisol every day, but we need it in certain amounts and at certain times. The ongoing way that many of us experience it today because of the chronic stress that we are experiencing is very damaging and very detrimental to a long and healthy life. So
Right.
whatever we can do to get that back into balance, to reset that, as it were, is really
Yes.
helpful.
Yeah, and that's one of the areas that I like to focus on is, when we think about longevity, and you and I talked a little bit about it when I look at my parents' decade where you worked and worked and worked, and then when you retired, you, you had a hobby, great, but if you didn't, you were retired, right? Where I think I'll speak for me, for my generation at least, right? I think people are seeing that we're living longer, but also that mindset of what retirement looks like is different. Like we don't necessarily have to say, okay, we're only working to age 65 or whatever that magic number is, freedom 55 or whatever you
Yeah, yeah,
choose. But
yeah.
it's also that mindset around enjoying life today as well, and not working for that retirement, not having that mindset, but also then pausing when you need to, when you feel that your body needs that break, and exploring different things around mindfulness, around relaxation that can really help you to heal in that moment at that time, and is going to impact your longevity. It's going to impact how you feel as you age. I think is starting to become forefront, right? We're starting to hear more around mindfulness, around nutrition, and how those things can have a huge impact to how we're going to live even later on. Because I
Yeah.
often said to people, you work today, you have benefits through a company, that's great. But when you are no longer there, hopefully you have your health, because at that point you're on your own, right? And so,
Hmm.
what are we doing to make sure we're good when we become on our own, if
Yeah.
you will?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and I forgot to ask this, but I'm imagining that a lot of your listeners are female or women, correct? Yeah. And it is changing now, but the whole way that many of us were raised is that, we served everyone else, our amazing children, our partner at work, maybe our church, our community, our kids' school, whatever. Okay. And then at the very end of the day, if we had 2 seconds left, we did some type of self-care. Sometimes it was crashing into a chair with a glass of wine, which might not be all that helpful anyways, but and I see it starting to change. I'm a huge advocate for, putting your oxygen mask on first. That's not selfish. You know, basically you're just going to tank and everything around you is going to go to hell in a handbasket, basically. So take the time all along the way. It actually makes you, I think, not that you're trying to do this to become a better mother or partner or employee or boss, whatever it is, but it does, because you simply are a more healthier person. You are more healed emotionally, spiritually. You are more in tune with whatever your sense of the sacred or shared humanity, whatever your sense of that is. You're just physically more energetic and able to do the things that you want to do. You can go on the ground and play with your kids and your knees don't hurt, or whatever. So I just think overall, the more women can start thinking like, okay, what do I need to be the best version of myself at this point? And individualize that, like you said, not just cookie cutter diet, cookie cutter exercise plan, cookie cutter, whatever your yoga or centered prayer or whatever your mindfulness routines are. But if you can really nail ones that just resonate with you and be peaceful and pull them out with enjoyment, oh my goodness, that's just going to go such a long ways to how you do life and how you experience it yourself. So,
That is hysterical. And friends who are listening, I did not pay Brenda to say that. Anybody who knows me, even in my career when I was in HR, always used to talk about we have to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first. So that's quite funny. And I talk about it's not selfish. It is bringing your best self forward. And why wouldn't you want to bring your best self forward in any part of your day? You're
yeah,
also educating your children, if you have children, or anyone else around you that admires you, to say, hey, look at this person. They can have it all because
yeah,
they are putting themselves first and
yeah,
making sure that they're not drained and not showing up as their best, because
yeah.
that's not how anybody wants to live.
No,
Trust me,
no,
if you
yeah.
if you're in that boat where you're exhausted, drained, and sick all the time, people are not looking at you saying, I want to be like that person.
Exactly,
With all due
exactly.
respect, right? So
Yeah. And I mean, I'm very grateful that my children have only heard about how sick I was and how emotionally, imbalanced sometimes and, whatever. And it's really lovely. Our oldest turns 40 this year. I'm like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? But I watch them and I see how they are doing life. And of course, it's not identical to myself and my husband, but they have taken a lot of this. I watch the way they're all active and enjoying the outdoors, and for the most part eating really well. Maybe not exactly as much as me, but I was a bit anal retentive. But I love their relationships with their partners, and it's very gratifying to see that some of what we learned kind of the hard way rubbed off on this next generation, that hopefully will have a little easier time of incorporating that.
I love that you say that. And that's what I always talk about in my journey is everybody who knows me knows that I've turned 60 this year. And so I said my 50s weren't great. My 50s were challenging for me. I went through a divorce. I lost my father. I lost my aunt. I had health issues, right? So, like a diamond, I was under a ton of pressure. And
Mm.
60s, if you have a 60th wedding anniversary, that's the diamond anniversary. So I
Right,
decided to make
right.
turning 60 the year to shine, the year of being that diamond because I was under pressure. But I often say, listen, I had to learn the hard way. So if I can help you to start living that better life that you can and are deserving to live at an earlier age, right? Like, because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, life is short. I think you and I have both seen what is the legacy that we want to leave behind, but
yeah,
also how do we want to live? We don't want to have regrets at the end of the day. And so
yeah.
that was a lot of why I decided to do what I did and put health first, right? As opposed to health last.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then kind of, well, what is fulfilling for me? And fulfilling for me, been in HR, so helping people
yeah.
is what it's all about. So what can I do to help people to live more fulfilled lives, not waiting till they're in their late 50s?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it looks different, excuse me, it looks different for everyone.
Hmm.
But I know in the last few years, we've been able to do some really cool things like, you know, scuba dive for the first time and hike down into the Grand Canyon. And, you know, we've done a couple of canoe trips. One really cool, like fly in where the plane drops you off on this little lake in the interior of BC. And with another couple of friends of ours, like do canoeing and portaging for 6 days, where you literally, we saw one other party in the whole 6 days and no bears, thank goodness. Okay. But like, everyone has their goals of what they want to do. But I really value that and I am over 60, okay, that I am able to have the physical energy and stamina to be able to do those things and be in what is literally my happy place, like way out in the boonies, no ambient light, no nothing. My husband jokes, he said, I sit by you, it's like your cells are vibrating. I go, yeah, it is. Like nature, you're talking about forest bathing. I'm like, bring it on. So you you might not even know what you want to quite do yet, but be ready, like take care of yourself for if an opportunity presents itself. You can go, that sounds really good. I think I'm a little scared of that, but I think I want to do that.
Love that.
So yeah, you
Yeah.
want to have that option there.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great example.
Mhm.
So, Brenda, what can you provide an example of maybe a small behavior shift that can lead to significant health improvements? And I know we've talked about food, but maybe like if listeners are listening today, what is one thing that you could say you could
Mhm.
change
Mhm.
or shift?
Yeah. So, and for anyone that resonated with them when I talked about being stuck in cortisol fight or flight mode and, you know, just having really realizing you're ruminating, you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're worrying about something that you have no control over, the end of the world, the whatever. Okay. Um, a really simple thing you can do is something called a yoga nidra, or
Mm,
it's that has become now known as non-sleep deep rest. Okay.
hmm.
So long, long history of use. But now, with the research that we can do on PET scans and looking at how people's brains respond to it, that very specific action really involves focusing on different parts of the body, a little bit like progressive muscle relaxation in and out, but a very specific pattern. You can just Google non-sleep deep rest. There's a couple of 10-minute or 20-minute things you can do. That has an amazing ability to stop that cycle and allow you to move into parasympathetic mode. There's a couple of other breathing patterns you can do, a physiological sigh. So they won't, if you were like I am, like really challenging genes in that area, you will also need a particular supplement. That's the only thing that I have found that actually resets it. Okay. But these other two inexpensive, no cost practices can be a very helpful tool in the meantime. That psychological breathing you can do 2 or 3 times. The traffic light, before you, I often do it before I go into a
Hmm.
podcast, and it can be, those two tools are very, very helpful.
And thank you for that. I
Yeah.
actually have a couple of freebies on my website for people around.
Okay.
One's a longer one longer
Okay.
version, but I've also got a shorter version of a small breath work. I love
Great.
yoga nidra. It's something that I've incorporated. I have a membership called Soulful Healing.
Oh, okay.
And once a month, they have the access to the
Mhm.
entire library, but once a month we have a live call where I take them through some form of education around the last one was around the nervous system and
Okay.
understanding how the impact to it and what you can do to support it and make it
Great.
healthy.
Great.
I think
Great.
it's, educating yourself as much as you can to understanding the triggers, right? So when we're under stress, what's the trigger? What does trauma do to us? And when we educate ourselves and arm ourselves with tools,
Yeah.
it doesn't stop us from encountering those things, but it
No.
certainly helps us to come out of them quicker, to be
Yeah.
able to heal faster, to handle
Yeah.
situations differently. And
Yeah.
so that is a huge core of what I do in my world.
Great.
And just,
Great.
yeah, even people who have said that, they can't meditate. And I'm like, breath work is a form of meditation, and you can do short little pieces of breath work, which
Yeah.
some companies are starting to introduce. And I have to give kudos to one of my former bosses. He actually introduced wellness at the beginning of every large meeting that we had, where we would start with some form of a quick little breath work to get everybody just settled and back calmed in.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how it can take the noise and the stresses of the day and just kind of go, okay, we're putting you over
Yeah.
here because this is
Yeah.
what we're doing right now. So I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, in my online programs that I co-lead with Alicia, we do a mindfulness minute every single time.
I love
You
that.
just got to get people in their chairs and able to be present,
Yeah.
and that can be super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
I love that. So what would you say a simple strategy is that a leader could use to kind of boost their physical energy? And we talked a little bit about either those who work in an office and are sitting at their desk all day long, which is very tiring, but
Yeah.
also those individuals who are on their feet all day long or in a car or a plane or things like that. What would you
Yeah.
say is something that they could do?
Yeah, I think two simple things is for those of us, and I speak to myself here at a desk a lot in the day. Now, especially with a lot of the sessions being online, you're just present there in the computer all the time. I will often do what I call 48 12s. I'm trying to remember where I got it from. I think maybe Atomic Habits. I can't remember. But 48 minutes on my phone will be set for concentrated work, and the notifications are off. I'm not checking email or anything. And then when that timer goes, that next 12 minutes is get up, go downstairs, do a bio break, go down and make a cup of tea, go out to my backyard, maybe stand in the grass in my bare feet, get your eyes looking at a distance instead
Mhm.
of at this short distance with a computer. So those are breaks that you can use throughout your day if you're more sedentary. If you're on the road, then the primary thing, you can certainly do those as well, make those a part of even if you're driving, get out, every once in a while, go for exercise, etc. But the biggest thing I noticed on the road, and we did a 10-week across Canada and US trip with all 5 kids at one point. Okay, I don't know what we were thinking, okay, but it was like there was a cooler in the car, and I cannot say enough about taking coolers if you're on a driving trip, even if you are on the road in an airplane. Find out what you're allowed to bring. Okay, don't bring big tubs of hummus and carry on because they will get absconded. Okay, but you want to make sure that you have the things that you know are going to optimally fuel you no matter where you are. So if you're someone that can eat nuts, then you've got those with you. I always pack, unless I'm heading to a different country internationally, but in Canada, I've got carrot sticks, I've got celery sticks. I will have a tiny thing of hummus that'll get under the milliliters thing you can carry in. We make sure that if we're traveling in the road, again, lots of veggies, raw cruciferous veggies are great for me. So try to have maybe a kale slaw mix somewhere in there. Again, the nuts, my husband needs a lot more meat than I do and a lot more saturated fat than I do. So there will be clean, beef jerky, pepperoni sticks, those kind of things in there. And then just even if you're stopping at a town for lunch or whatever, try to hit up a grocery store instead of a fast food place. Just go in, hit the deli section, Do they have some salads? Do they have some a veggie platter with some dip? Can you get just some grilled chicken? Can you pull some things like that that are going to fuel you really well? And if you absolutely have to stop at a fast food joint, you're at one of those getting gas up things and whatever, then we talked about this before. Can you find a baked potato with some chili? Can you find a salad? Can you, we're Canadian. I love A&W. Okay, all grass-fed beef. I don't do well on a lot of carbohydrates. So I just love their burger in the lettuce wrap.
Hmm.
And then I'll get my carbs from some nice yam fries or something like that, you know. So just be mindful before you throw stuff in the cart, before you order. Just take a minute, look at the menu, remember what your body does best on, that optimal fuel mix, and then, accordingly order or pick up or whatever. So
I
often
love
we're
that.
just so hungry. Yeah.
I love that idea of the grocery store. I wish I had met you when I was traveling because the grocery store, now that I think about it, they even have sometimes the prepared foods, right? And not saying that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
who knows what their sodium content is and stuff like that. But I
Yes.
mean, far better than stopping off at a McDonald's or something like
Sure,
that.
sure.
And right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other thing is at this season, lately because I've been driving, but I've been trying to, one of my mindfulness things is I try to avoid the highway when possible. So maybe if
Okay.
I'm going to an event or something, I will drive on the highway to get there, but then I'll take the back roads coming back home. There are
Great.
tons of little markets and fruit stands on the side where you can pick up some fresh produce that is
Yes.
just absolutely beautiful, and farmers markets and things like
Yeah.
that. Even if you're
Totally.
traveling to the US, I know somebody who, when they travel to the US, they know where their favorite farmers market is so that they hit
Yeah.
it up while
Yeah.
they're down.
No, absolutely. You support the local economy. You're getting stuff that was probably picked that morning, local berries or whatever is there. Absolutely. Those are great options. Great
Yeah,
options.
yeah. Brenda, what would you say from your experience and the people that you work with? And of course, it's called Today's Balanced Leader. And I always talk
Yeah.
about leaders is everyone, because we are
Yeah.
also self leaders. But
Yeah.
maybe can you share what you think some of the biggest challenges that leaders face nowadays around maintaining their physical and emotional well being? And we talked a little bit about it, but what
Mhm.
are you seeing as the biggest challenges today?
I think probably two. One, I would say social media.
Mm,
Okay. Just because many of us need it for work, but it is also very life draining. And so, I try to minimize the time that I'm on it, do my posts, do whatever. I also run a number of online groups that I have to be in answering questions. So try to do that and then try to set it aside. Like when I'm on my walks in my nature, like I'm not checking my emails or whatever. And even if my husband and I are watching a movie together or something, we have this household policy. We're not on our phones. We're not watching a screen while we're on a mini screen. Okay. So let's get this done. So first thing would be just figure out how to make social media work for you instead of, getting sucked into the likes and the thumbs ups and the trolls that give you crappy messages that can devastate you. So really use it as a tool instead of impacting your whole thing. And then I think the other thing is just really, and I can't emphasize it enough, like just figure out ways to promote health where you are. So whatever you are leading, like when you mentioned with this leader that started with mindfulness, like if you are organizing a lunch for someone or for your team, can you not just order in pizza? Like, can you, and I love a good pizza, don't get me wrong, but can we order in a veggie platter with it? Can we not have pastries every staff meeting? Can we have a fruit platter? Can we whatever? Like start thinking in ways that are going to promote, and I don't want it to sound like this is an ulterior motive, but healthier employees and coworkers is going to be good for your bottom line.
yeah.
So start thinking of ways that they get a lunch break. They're not expected to work at lunch. They can go out and walk around the block or whatever. Maybe if you have the resources, there can be a gym in your facility, whatever. Like try to, I guess, be an example yourself, but also make way for those that you work with And if you don't have employees, I'm a sole entrepreneur. I do that with the people that I'm working with as coaching in my programs. If someone needs to be eating lunch when we're having an online, I'm like, you go for it. Like, I don't want you, crapping out at the end of a 90-minute session because you didn't fuel well yet today. So yeah, make some allowances for people to be as well as possible and support that.
I really like that. And I shared a little bit about the world that I came with you.
Mm.
And I think, sometimes we look at lunch as, okay, I got 30 minutes. I'm going to quickly run. I'm going to eat my lunch. Don't know if I'll take all 30 minutes. And that going outside now year round can be a challenge depending on where you live. But I think even just changing the environment that you're looking at, and I
Yep.
think some lunchrooms can be really depressing. So maybe even exploring or challenging your team of what can you do to make this more of a welcoming, calming space, that when
Mhm.
you come in here for your break, that when you come in here for your lunch, that it's a space that makes you feel like it's not just in a broom closet somewhere, and you can
Exactly.
actually enjoy it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Anything like that to change the environment, usually lunchrooms, when I worked as social worker, they just had big signs that said, clean up after yourself. Don't take a lunch if it doesn't have your name on it. It wasn't super, conducive, like you said, to, chilling. This is going to digest well. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a picture on a wall that's at least calming so you can pretend you're on a beach
Yeah,
somewhere.
outside, exactly.
Outside if
Or
you take it outside.
maybe actually an outside window that you could look out. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And that was actually going to be one of my last questions. So when we think about leaders fostering that culture of wellness as well, what do you think so we talked about food, but maybe a little bit more from the mindset, being
Mhm.
mindful when we talk about stress, when we talk about people being overwhelmed, people being burnt out, people being just not happy in their day to day. What would you say as a leader? What could they do to really inspire their teams? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of my training was in, as I mentioned, the progressive behavioral and emotional development of people, and both as social work and then also co-leading the faith community. And I think with that, one of the things to remember is that people are in different stages. Like we start off very egocentric. We have to, like, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've got to provide a shelter. You need to get some food. You've got to get some water and some heat. Like, we are driven people when we are young, and for good reason. So you're going to have some staff maybe that are in that age still, in that stage where they're really gung ho and they're go getters, and they just want to make their mark in the world and get a bigger house and a bigger car. And don't look down at them for that, because that is a necessary development, but help them. We also don't want to stay in that age forever, okay? So help them progress and grow. Maybe you offer, courses on stages of development and on human growth and experience, and help them understand that there are going to be some challenges and some huge setbacks, but out of those they can potentially learn so much and become a more well-rounded person and move on to where they are less egocentric, and that's always going to be a part of us, because that we need that. But where the other part of them, and it's different terms, true self, real self, nice self, whatever you want to call it, that part begins to grow and they become more collaborative in their working together on the job and in their families, and eventually where they become more altruistic, maybe not like a Mother Teresa or something like that, but they're also doing some volunteer work. Maybe your business does some pro bono stuff and they're volunteering more for that. So I would just say, help your staff grow along that very normal, natural development, because it's very unbecoming to have 40 and 50-year-old staff people who are still stuck in that very beginning egocentric stage. Unbecoming. It's also not helpful for your team.
Right.
So yeah, whatever's needed to help that journey of rude awakening and sadness and humility, but then, oh, out of the embarrassment, I'm becoming a better person.
Right, right. And we do have so many different stages, right? I was talking to somebody about some of what I do when they talk about transformation. And I always say transformation is a result of some form of change. But change can be so many things to so many
Yeah,
different people, right? It
yeah,
could be
yeah,
loss of a job, it could be loss of a person that's important to you, it could be divorce, it can be empty nester as your kids grow up. There's so much change. And to grow so that you are looking forward to those changes in your life is kind of
yeah.
pretty cool as opposed to, oh crap, now what do I do?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly, exactly. There's a really great spiritual leader by the name of Richard Rohr out of the States, and he's been on Brene Brown's podcast, and she just did the he just did the forward, I think, to her latest book, or vice versa. I can't remember, but he talks about growth coming through either great love or great suffering. And
Right.
it's like you said, you lose a job, you lose a partner, or you have a child and your heart swells up magnanimously with love for this child. Those are the types of things that we often minimize or try to run away from in some ways, but they are the things that will help us move forward,
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And I always ask my leaders, oh, my question is missing. Sorry. The last question that I always ask, and it's not here.
I
What
know
would
what
you
it I know what it
say?
is.
What
Yeah.
would you say is the one thing that has really made a difference in your life, whether it's been an experience, a book, something you've learned from a mentor? What is that one thing that you'd like everyone to know that you've learned?
It's a really good question, actually. Okay, I'm
Oh,
thinking
thank you.
about this. And what I decided is that it was a lesson that you have a lot more control over your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being than you think. I think that kind of tagging onto what we just talked about in those different stages, emotional, mental, spiritual growth, it can be really discouraging sometimes. Like, we make mistakes. We're embarrassed. We have to eat humble pie, whatever it is. But I think for me, the biggest lesson has been that I can change. I can figure out ways to gain more energy. I can foster better sleep because I used to be a horrible sleeper. I can learn tools to handle anxiety or lack of focus. I can come to a deeper place of relationship with myself, with others, and with that sense that we talked about of sacred or shared humanity. So, wherever I am right now does not have to be where I am in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. I have some control over this and I can make changes that will produce positive benefits. So, yeah.
I love that because we
Mm,
are the only people who can change how we live our
no,
lives. We're the only
no,
people in control of it. And
yeah.
that is beautiful to
Thank you.
leave off on. But one thing for the listeners too to learn, one of the things that Brenda does, and I'll let you share a little bit about what you
Mhm.
do, is Brenda actually will take the testing and she mentioned run it through a system and then kind of walk you through um, your diet, your exercise, your supplements, your lifestyle, how to live your life. It's called the Nourish Your DNA review. And so Brenda and I were talking ahead of time, and I'm actually going to do another recording with Brenda. And I'm going to do a DNA test. And we're going to take the results. We're going to let Brenda run through it. And then we're going to record kind of what we learn about it so that you
Yeah.
too can learn what it's like to actually hear what your DNA is telling you, and we're going to be able to share that with you. So, Brenda, what else would you like to share about that, and also share other ways that people could reach out to you,
Mhm.
which I'll include in the show notes. But feel free to
Yeah.
share how they could work
Okay.
with you and what you do.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, the Nourish Your DNA review is very fun. I'm super happy that you like to do that because it really does give some very specific points. And sometimes people can be nervous about getting their DNA done. They're like, oh, I've had clients come in who've had done and said, oh, I just have crappy DNA. And I say, okay, you do not understand evolution, my young man or my young woman. You are here because of survival of the fittest. Now, sometimes your DNA is a bit of a mismatch, for today's environment with stress or the readily available supply of food or whatever, but it's not bad DNA. There can be some challenges, but we can work through this. So don't be nervous, okay? And then, yeah, my website is imbalancelm.com, and there are some free resources on there. There is a free infographic around what you can get with a DNA analysis, for example. And there's another free self-wellness survey that you can look at that kind of analyzes where you are right now and if you want to go further and whether epigenetic work might help you. So there's some number of resources on there people are welcome to check out.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'll be including all those in the show notes so that people can just click and find it in case they want to do it. And then stay tuned. I'll be advertising when we're going to be doing part 2, depending on how long it takes to get the results back and get them over to Brenda. But yeah, we'll be doing another episode with Brenda so you can see what my DNA is telling me and enjoy the journey, because I am super transparent when it comes to what life has to bring. It is what it is, right? So
it is.
We can all learn from it.
No, and really in this case, I feel like knowledge really is power. Like it gives you tools, and then you can do some things to mitigate the likelihood of something happening. I have 2 parents who died with Alzheimer's, so I can have a sense of that. And it's like I just know that I'm doing everything I can to prevent that from happening or to happen as far down the road as possible. So it gives you, I think, a sense of power in some ways and ability to do some things that could really impact your future. So it's kind of cool that way.
Brenda, I have to say, I love that you said that, and I was sorry to hear about your parents, but I love that you said that because we talked a little bit about that ahead of time, where I have Alzheimer's on both sides of my family. And so being able to undertake that information, understand it, and then do something with it that's holistic, like what you feel like you're in control then, because it's not just waiting for the prescription to come out. And deal with it after fact. It's what can I do to prevent whatever these issues are as long as possible, and maybe minimize them to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are some genetically inheritable conditions that we have very little that can be done about them, but you can still, like you said, try to make it be as well handled as possible. But there are a lot of conditions that are influenced by genetics, but that we can reset, or we can have a great deal of influence. You may have the BRCA gene, for example. I'm not saying you in general, but just someone in general, and never get breast cancer. And then women who don't have the BRCA gene end up getting breast cancer because, again, the environment plays such a role in how genes are expressed. So we see it as a roadmap. And then what can we do that helps us handle this roadmap to the best of our ability?
Yeah, and that's really what holistic healing to me is all about, is understanding it ahead of time and treating or living a life that's treating how you are today, as opposed to waiting for once the illness has its grip on you, right? So
exactly.
Love that.
Prevention's always better than having to deal with it after the fact.
Agree.
Yeah.
Brenda, thank you. Unless you've got any last words, I want to thank you for joining me, and I can't wait to have you back. I'll get on that and get that ordered so we can have you back and you can walk the listeners through it, and we can learn together, because that's what this podcast is all about.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
My pleasure.
Okay.
That's all for this episode of today's Balanced Leader. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion on wellness and leadership, and that you took away some valuable insights and strategies to help you become a better leader in your own life. Please leave a rating and review. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, as we continue our exploration of what it means to live life as today's leader. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and remember that true leadership starts with taking care of your own well-being. One deep breath in and one deep breath out. Keep striving for excellence and inspiring others to do the same. And finally, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Today's Balanced Leader.